We begin by seeing a farmer resting in the barn after a long day of work. It's already night when the farmer suddenly hears strange noises coming from not far away, so he decides to check the area. He vaguely sees something in the dark eating what appears to be his dog. Seeing this terrifying scene, he doesn't dare to approach. However, the man shouts to try to scare whatever it is. Unfortunately, he does not succeed in doing so. Instead, he irritates the beast that was there. The creature drags the barbed wire, and the farmer's leg is caught by the iron wires, causing him excruciating pain. After enduring the pain, he frees himself from the wire and then crawls forward with difficulty, but unfortunately, a huge creature was already behind him. The man turned his head only to see the creature, which is larger than a rhinoceros, showing its huge fangs. Before he could react, the unfortunate farmer was mercilessly dragged into the darkness and killed. Moments later, not far from there, Ryan and Hannah were resting in their camping tent. Ryan, feeling the urgent need to relieve himself, goes outside to urinate. The next second, Ryan's painful screams echoed in the air. Hannah was completely unaware of the danger approaching and paid no attention to Ryan, thinking that he was playing a joke on her to try to scare her. At first, she thought it was Ryan playing a prank, but as she listened, she realized something was wrong. Hannah cautiously opened the tent and saw Ryan's mutilated body. This horrific scene made Hannah scream uncontrollably, and she didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the creature invaded the young woman's tent and killed her. Two elderly people camping nearby quickly heard the distant screams and grabbed their shotguns to investigate. Ken saw a giant boar and thought he had drunk too much because he had never seen an animal so large. So, Ken handed the shotgun to Blue to take a look, but Blue was also terrified. He saw a boar the size of a van devouring a corpse, and it must have weighed about 1,000 kilos. Frightened, Blue quickly pulled the trigger, but due to poor eyesight, he missed the boar. When Blue was about to fire a second shot, the Boar King, frightened by the gunfire, had already disappeared. To understand the situation, Ken and Blue hurried to the spot where the boar had been and discovered that the couple had been torn apart. From the number of tents at the site, there were 4 people camping there, but only 2 bodies were found. To find the remaining 2 people, Ken and Blue decided to split up. One would return to town for help, while the other would search the area for survivors. But on the way back to town, Blue kept hearing strange grunting noises around him. He turns around again and sees the terrifying, bloodthirsty beast staring at him. Blue knew that now he was considered prey by the monster, so he had no choice but to curse at the beast, trying to relieve his tension. Blue, with a wooden stick, was ready for the confrontation, but the creature ferociously attacked him, killing the man. Not far away, the other couple was telling horror stories deep in the forest when, suddenly, the boyfriend clearly heard the sound of a boar. He used his flashlight to follow the noise but saw nothing. When he turned around, he discovered that his girlfriend had been impaled by the creature that was already there. The terrifying tusks had pierced her mouth, and the beast crushed the young woman's dead body, and then the paralyzed man became the next victim. Ken, still searching for the missing couple, arrives at the scene of the attack but unfortunately finds the victims dead. Strangely, they had not been eaten. Ken didn't expect to be surprised. However, the tusked monster boar suddenly appears and attacks him. The man is completely furious. He then pulls out a knife, ready to fight the creature. The monster opens its huge mouth, still full of the blood of its victims, and with a menacing grunt, Ken is also devoured. The next day, we see a man named Bernie driving calmly not far from the farm where the creature's attacks happened. Suddenly he is taken by surprise as something crashes into his car, causing it to flip over. The impact creates a loud noise that can be heard for several kilometers. The scene shifts to Debbie and her family, who were camping. When the sound of the impact reaches them, and noticing that Bernie, her brother, still hasn't returned, Debbie becomes worried that something might have happened to him. She decides to send her husband Bruce to check, along with their future son-in-law named Robert, who reluctantly accompanies him. Fortunately, Bernie wasn't seriously injured. He noticed that the side of the car that was hit was covered with hair, but the door was so bent that it wouldn't open. Frustrated, he had to kick the door open with his feet. He gets out of the car furious but sees no sign of what caused it. In his anger, he quickly grabs a long knife and his hunting rifle. Bernie then pours a box of bullets into his hand and quickly reloads his weapon. In his entire life, no one had dared to attack him like this, much less an animal. He then set off to find the beast and take his revenge. Meanwhile, Robert and Bruce were on their way to find Bernie. Robert took the opportunity to discuss the dowry price with Bruce. After some discussion, Robert wanted to negotiate, which led to a disagreement. At this moment, the giant boar was hiding behind a nearby tree. When the animal appeared, Robert and Bruce froze in fear. Suddenly, Robert pushed Bruce to the ground and then turned and ran. The boar immediately grabbed Bruce in its mouth. When Bernie arrived with his gun, he was horrified to find Bruce torn apart by the terrifying creature. Without hesitation, he raised the gun and fired. However, the king boar, with its thick skin, roared a few times in shock and then fled the scene. In the distance, Robert shouted for his girlfriend, Ella, to run. However, the distance was too great, and the woman couldn't hear what her boyfriend was saying. But seeing her boyfriend fall, Ella still found the scene funny and smiled at it. Debbie saw that only Robert had returned and didn't know what had happened. She quickly asked Robert why Bruce hadn't returned. Robert then said that Bruce had been killed and eaten by a monstrous boar. The family thought Robert was joking, but the next second, they were terrified. In the blink of an eye, the creature devoured Robert and took him to his death. Ella found it difficult to accept and fell to the ground, crying in pain. At this moment, Ella's uncle, Bernie, quickly arrived. The situation was urgent, so he handed the shotgun to his nephew Bart and then grabbed Ella and ran in the opposite direction. The family was already terrified. Bernie, worried that the monster boar might suddenly return, led them across the river to the farm on the other side, but without the help of a vehicle, they couldn't leave the farm until nightfall. The family is terrified and very afraid, fleeing for their lives. Even in the darkness of the night, they do not dare to rest for a moment and constantly search for a safe place. Debbie and her daughter followed Bernie, nervously looking around, while Bart calmly followed behind them. The king boar followed their scent closely, watching them from the nearby grass. Suddenly, the creature let out a loud snort, scaring them. Bernie reacted quickly, urgently pulling the mother and daughter to start running. In the chaos, Bart, who was running behind, accidentally tripped and fell to the ground. They stopped immediately and looked back. The king boar had already reached Bart's side, and everyone was too scared to move. Debbie could only watch helplessly as Bart was dragged away by the king boar, unable to do anything. She collapsed in agony, refusing to leave. Bernie had no choice but to drag Debbie and Ella, continuing their desperate escape. No one could withstand such a brutal attack as that of the creature, so the only option was to keep running for their lives. Moments later, they finally found a dilapidated cabin where they could hide for a while. Once inside, Bernie quickly locked the wooden door. At this moment, Debbie and Ella were on the verge of collapse. Seeing this, Bernie gently approached to comfort his sister, but Debbie blamed Bernie for her son's death. She continued to reprimand her brother, saying that despite his size, he couldn't even save his own nephew. Bernie felt deeply guilty and didn't know what to say. At midnight, Debbie and Ella were shivering with cold. There was a pile of dry firewood in front of the door, so Bernie decided to go out and get some to make a fire and keep them warm, but the moment he opened the door, the king boar launched an attack without hesitation. At the critical moment, Bernie did not waver this time. He pulls out his knife and furiously strikes the boar monster to protect his family. Bernie takes on the responsibility of a protector and fights bravely without hesitation against the terrible creature. The creature then staggered momentarily, stunned by Bernie's fierce attack. Debbie and Ella took the opportunity to run out of the cabin and hide behind Bernie. Bernie tells Debbie and Ella to run while he stays to hold off the boar. He launched another attack on the king boar, trying to buy enough time for Debbie and Ella to escape, but by this time, the fierce animal had already regained its strength, so it knocked the man to the ground. Bernie lost his knife, leaving him without a weapon to counterattack. Furious, Bernie punched the monster, but unfortunately, he was no match for that opponent and was impaled by its sharp tusks. The king boar then threw Bernie against the small cabin, pinning him to the ground and repeatedly attacking him. Finally, using every ounce of his strength, Bernie managed to break free and stand up. He quickly grabbed nearby objects to counterattack, throwing them at the beast, but to no avail. Then he spotted a shovel and charged with it, but Bernie ended up slipping and falling directly under the creature. The beast pinned Bernie with its paw, leaving him unable to move. Debbie and Ella, although they had escaped, were still lost, exhausted, cold, and hungry. To avoid another attack from the creature, Debbie and Ella lit fires around them, hoping to deter the beast if it appeared. They also made torches with strips of cloth to keep the boar away, but when Debbie looked to the side, she saw the huge creature with its mouth full of human blood. Debbie and Ella were terrified and trembling with fear. The fires not only failed to keep the monster away, but the flames also attracted it. Debbie and Ella didn't know what to do, so they desperately waved their torches to fend off the beast's attacks. The large creature, undisturbed by the small flames, became even more enraged. It knocked them down directly with its snout and grabbed Ella's thigh in its mouth. In a moment of life or death, Debbie and Ella could only punch the king boar's head with all their might, but it only tickled the animal. When Debbie and Ella thought they were going to die, a blinding light suddenly shone in the distance, attracting the beast and giving the two a chance to move away. A pickup truck then came down a slope at high speed and hit the king boar heavily, throwing it into the air. It was Sasha, Ken's daughter. Since her father had not returned, she went out to look for him and ended up witnessing this terrifying scene. The creature, now with parts of its body broken, lay on the ground struggling to survive. Debbie, enraged, quickly grabbed a shotgun from the car and aimed at the terrible monster, determined to avenge her family members who had been killed. But even after firing several shots, the boar was still not dead. Debbie focused and managed to hit a precise shot in the animal's eye, killing it afterward. Still shaken, the three quickly drove away, and not far down the road, they found Bernie, who was seriously injured. Bart, who had been taken by the king boar, was also alive. It turns out that the creature had only taken them back to its lair, planning to keep them for later consumption. The film ends with everyone happy and with smiles on their faces, celebrating their deliverance, but the nightmare is not over yet, as an even larger two-ton boar lives and watches them leave.